What kind of man sells his wife like a broken tool, and what kind of man decides she's worth saving? The first time Eli Kavanaugh saw Ruthie Lelair, she was on her knees in the mud behind the Buckhorn General Store. Her hair hung over her face, her lip was bleeding, and there was a boot print stamped across her back like someone had tried to grind her into the earth. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even shaking. She looked like someone who had run out of tears a long time ago. Her husband had just sold her for $30, an old rifle and a half-empty bottle of sour mash. The sheriff stood nearby, scratching behind his ear like he wished he could disappear into his own coat. "He signed her over legal," the sheriff said, voice low and ashamed. "Technically, it's just her upkeep. Says she's barren. Says she ain't no good to him no more." Eli didn't answer. He was staring at the woman on the ground. Mud clung to her dress. Her cheek was bruised purple. A thin line of blood slid slowly down her temple, but she didn't wipe it. She kept her eyes on the dirt like she was listening to something only she could hear. "You buyin' or not?" the sheriff asked, voice sharper now. "Someone's got to take her." Eli reached into his coat, pulled out a roll of bills, and placed it in the sheriff's hand. He didn't count it, didn't blink. "Get her off the ground," he said. "She comes with me." That was how it started. No wedding, no papers, no vows. Just a trade made in cold air while cattle bellowed in the distance and snow threatened to fall. Ruthie didn't look at Eli as he lifted her up. She didn't thank him. She didn't speak at all. Her breath came in short, uneven pulls, but she didn't resist when he guided her to his horse. The sheriff walked away fast. Like the moment she was out of his sight, he could pretend none of it ever happened. They rode north toward Eli's ranch, a day's ride beyond the canyons and creek beds. Eli didn't say much. He wasn't a talker on a good day, and this wasn't one. Ruthie clutched the wool blanket he'd wrapped around her shoulders, riding side saddle on a tired bay. She winced when the horse stumbled but stayed steady. Her hands looked scarred along the knuckles, and one wrist was crooked like it hadn't healed right. He didn't ask about it. The sun died behind the hills as they reached his ranch. It wasn't fancy. A main house, 2 bunkhouses, a long barn, and miles of quiet land where the wind never stopped moving. Eli swung off his horse and helped Ruthie down. She followed him inside without a word. "I'll show you the spare room," he said. She stood in the doorway like she wasn't sure she was allowed to cross it. Only when he stepped aside did she move forward. "You ain't gotta earn nothing here," he said. "You don't owe me." Ruthie's eyes flickered, not trusting, not disbelieving, just empty. "Thank you," she whispered, voice rough from lack of use. The first month, she barely left the house. She cleaned the floors even when they didn't need it, cooked simple meals, repaired old curtains, washed windows that hadn't seen a rag in years. She moved with careful hands and quiet steps, always watching, always listening. But Eli noticed things changing. Her limp faded. She stopped flinching when the wind slammed the shutters. Her breathing steadied when she slept. One Sunday she stepped out to the barn where he was mucking out a stall, sweat running down his neck. "I can help," she said. "I ain't broken." He didn't argue. He handed her a pitchfork. They worked until the sun dipped low and turned the world gold. She didn't talk much, but once, just once, she smiled. It was faint, small, the kind that looked like it hurt her cheeks to make, but Eli held on to that moment like it was something rare. That night, she ate more than she usually did. When she looked at him across the dinner table, he felt something tight loosen inside him. "Why'd you buy me?" she asked suddenly. He stared into his coffee. "Because leaving you there didn't sit right with me." She didn't smile, but her shoulders eased. "You can stay here," he said. "As long as you want." "I'll earn it," she said. He let her believe whatever she needed. Days turned into weeks. They rode together, fixed fences, tended cattle. She learned to shoot. He taught her to gut game and salt meat. Sometimes she had nightmares. He found her once in the barn, shaking against a bale of hay. He didn't touch her, just sat beside her. "You ain't back there," he said gently. "No one's coming for you now." Her breathing slowed. "I believe you," she whispered, like trust was a fragile bone she was afraid to break. By the time winter hit, People in town had started whispering. That rich cowboy keeps a barren cast-off on his land, bought her like livestock, keeps her like a stray dog. Ruthie ignored them. Eli did too. But she walked straighter, wore her hair down, met his eyes across the table, and once, when they passed each other in the kitchen, her hand brushed his. She didn't pull it away. Neither did he. It could have stayed simple, quiet, safe, but trouble knew Ruthie's name, and it wasn't done with her. It arrived in the form of a drunken man, her old husband, riding into town, shouting how he'd come to collect what was his. And Ruthie heard. That evening she sat on Eli's porch rail, hands tight in her lap, jaw hard. "You want me to handle it?" Eli asked. She shook her head slowly. "No, I'll go." He frowned. "You sure?" quote. Ruthie stood. "I ain't broken." He nodded. "Then I'll ride behind you, just in case." And that was the moment everything began to change. Ruthie rode into town with her chin lifted and her shoulders square, the cold air stinging her cheeks. Eli followed several steps behind, giving her space but ready to step in the moment she needed him. The streets were quiet, except for the rumble of the saloon doors as the wind pushed them open and shut. Her old husband's voice carried all the way to the hitching post. He was inside, shouting, laughing, bragging, a man too drunk to know fear and too cruel to understand shame. The moment Ruthie stepped through the saloon doorway, heads turned. The room fell into a strange, heavy silence. The man froze mid-sentence. His jaw dropped before twisting into a sneer. "Well, look here," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "My little lost wife. Heard you've been living easy off that rich cowboy." Ruthie didn't flinch. She didn't hide. She walked right up to him, her boots steady on the wooden floor. "You sold me," she said calmly. "You lost the right to speak my name." Laughter bubbled out of him, bitter and ugly. "You always were trouble. Should have gotten rid of you sooner." Before he could blink, Ruthie hit him across the face. The crack echoed like a whip. He dropped to his knees, stunned. The men around them stared wide-eyed. He staggered up, pulling a knife from his boot, spitting blood onto the floor. "You think you're something now? You think he made you better?" Ruthie pulled her revolver but didn't aim it. She let it hang by her side, calm and steady. "I made myself better," she said. "You had nothing to do with it." He stepped back, fear creeping into his eyes. He cursed under his breath and backed out of the saloon, limping and holding his ribs. No one stopped him. No one dared. Ruthie holstered her gun. She turned to Eli. "Let's go," she said softly. They rode home in silence, snow falling in slow white sheets around them. Eli kept glancing over, waiting for fear to break through her calm, but her face stayed steady. "You all right?" he asked when they reached the porch. Ruthie looked at him, her breath coming out in a cloud. "Yes," she said. "For the first time, I think I am." That night, Eli left the door to her room cracked open, not wide, just enough. Hours later, she stepped into his room and lay beside him. She didn't speak. She didn't touch him. She just breathed the same air, quiet and slow, as if learning what safety felt like. And Eli felt something in him loosen, something he didn't know he'd been holding for years. By spring, Ruthie was no longer the woman he'd found in the mud behind the general store. She learned the ranch like it was a language. She roped cattle with quick hands. She shot better than half the ranch hands. She walked with purpose, with strength, with a quiet fire that everyone could see. The men started calling her ma'am, with respect, not pity. But peace never lasted long in the West. The trouble began with a fire on the northern pasture. Smoke rose into the sky, and by the time Eli and Ruthie reached it, 3 cattle were burned alive against a broken fence. The rails had been cut clean. Oil-soaked rags lay scattered in the black dirt. "It's a message," Eli said. Ruthie knelt in the ashes, her fingers brushing the ground. "Someone's testing us," she said, "testing how soft they think we are." 2 weeks later, they found another fence cut near the creek. This time there was no fire, just a calf with its neck broken and a strip of skin peeled from its back. Ruthie's jaw tightened. This isn't about cattle," she said. "This is about pride." Eli nodded. "Mine or yours?" She didn't answer. That night she oiled every rifle in the house, her movements sharp and focused. Eli watched her quietly. He could see the old wounds rising in her eyes, the kind that didn't bleed anymore but still hurt. She put a revolver on her bedside table and didn't sleep. At dawn, she saddled a horse. "Where you headed?" Eli asked. "Back to a place I left behind," she said. "Someone there knows something." He stepped forward. "I'll ride with you." She shook her head. "No, some things I need to face alone." And he saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't running from her past, she was hunting it. Ruthie rode south. She crossed the broken fields and the abandoned mining camps, where she had once been nothing more than a name on a list and a body to move around. But now she rode tall, armed, and quiet, a woman carved from survival. She found a man named Pike Hatcher behind a livery in a half-dead town. A man who once traded people the way others traded horses. He didn't know her at first. Then recognition hit him. His hand twitched toward his belt, but she had her pistol on him before he blinked. "You sent someone to scare me off Eli's land?" she said. Pike's voice cracked. "Not me. I just passed a message." "A message from who?" When he paused, she shot him in the leg. He screamed, dropped to the dirt, clutching his knee. "Answer," she said calmly. "Harlan Nash," he cried. "Big ranch up north. Says Eli stole grazing land when the river shifted. Says a woman like you ain't meant to run anything." Quote. She holstered her gun and rode away, leaving him screaming for help. Ruthie returned by dawn. Mud streaked her boots, her hair was wind-whipped. The revolver at her hip was dirty from use. Eli stepped onto the porch. "You find what you needed?" She tossed a strip of cloth at his feet, Nash's brand. "They won't stop unless we make them." Eli looked at her, the fire in her eyes, the strength in her stance. "Are you sure you want this fight?" he asked. Ruthie's voice didn't shake. "I'm not here to play house. I'm here to survive." That was the day they stopped being just two people living under the same roof. That was the day they became a force. The wind across the Kavanaugh ranch died in a way that made the world feel hollow. Even the dogs refused to bark. Eli stood at the barn door with his rifle resting in his hands, eyes fixed on the dark line of land beyond the eastern fence. He didn't need anyone to tell him what was coming. Ruthie stepped up beside him, her revolver strapped at her hip, her knife tucked at the back of her belt. Her face was calm, almost too calm, as if she had walked this road before. "Nash is coming," she said quietly. Eli nodded. There was no fear in his eyes. Whatever happened next, he wasn't facing it alone. They walked toward the eastern fence line, where the dirt dipped, and the grass grew tall. The sky was so still, it felt like it was holding its breath. Then, through the grass, 6 men appeared, walking, not riding, moving like shadows with rifles across their backs. Nash walked in the center, a cruel smile stretched across his face. They stopped 10 feet away. "You got no claim on this land," Eli said. Nash tilted his head. "I don't want the land, cowboy. I want her." Ruthie stepped forward, boots steady, chin lifted. There was no tremble in her hands. "You don't get to want anything from me," she said. "Not anymore." Nash laughed, bitter and sharp. "You forget what you are. I should have killed you when your man first walked away. Should have buried you before you grew teeth." Quote. Ruthie stared straight at him. "I'm not the woman you left behind." He reached for his gun, but Ruthie drew faster. The first bullet hit his thigh. The second slammed into his collarbone, knocking him backward into the dirt. His men grabbed for their guns, but Eli's rifle was already raised. "You willing to die for him?" Eli asked. None of them answered. One by one, they dropped their weapons and backed away into the tall grass, disappearing like the cowards they were. Nash lay on the ground, gasping, clawing at the dirt for a pistol he no longer had. His chest heaved, his eyes were wild. Ruthie walked to him, slow and steady. She knelt beside him, her shadow falling over his face. "You were right about one thing," she said. "The girl I used to be is dead." She slid her knife from her belt, the metal catching the pale morning light. "But what I am now is worse for men like you." Nash tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. Ruthie stood, turned away from him, and walked back to Eli without looking back. "Leave him," she said. "The worms will finish what's left." Quote, They didn't talk as they rode back toward the house. There was no need. The war was done. The land felt different, like it had been holding its breath and finally let it out. The next morning, Eli buried the weapons behind the stables. Ruthie washed her hands in the cold creek until her fingers turned red. The ranch slowly returned to life. The cattle calmed. The men stayed on, working longer than they were paid to, respecting Ruthie with a quiet awe. She built a small garden near the kitchen door. Rosemary, onions, wildflowers. Eli found her kneeling in the dirt one afternoon, hair tied back, a smudge of soil across her cheek. He sat beside her. "You dream of running anymore?" he asked. "No," she said. "Not since I chose to stay." He nodded. "You dream at all now?" She thought for a moment. "Sometimes I see that first night," she said softly. "The mud. My hands. You." "I see it too," Eli said. "It used to make me wake up shaking," she said. "And now?" She looked down at her hands, then at his. "Now I reach for you." He took her hand, held it gentle but firm. There were no vows, no preacher, no witnesses, just the land, the wind, and two people who had fought their way back to life. They stood together, hands dirty, breath slow, heart steady. Some love comes like a soft sunrise. Theirs came like a storm. Ruthie became something of a legend, not the kind written in dime novels, the kind whispered between women passing through town, the ones who carried bruises, the ones who had lost too much, the ones who wished for a place to stand firm. They came to her in quiet. They left stronger. And Eli, who once believed his heart was buried with the past, found it again in a woman who had been thrown away but refused to stay broken. He hadn't bought a wife. He had bought a chance, for her, for himself, for the life neither of them thought they deserved. And together, they built something no one could tear down. Not fire, not fear, not men like Nash. Because love built on survival didn't break, it endured.